The morning air along the Norfolk Pier carried the sharp smell of salt, diesel, and cold steel. It was the kind of smell that clung to clothes and memories alike, the kind that never really left you once you'd served long enough. The gray water lapped against the concrete edge in steady, patient rhythms, as if the ocean itself were waiting for something to go wrong. She stood just outside the security checkpoint, hands tucked into the pockets of her faded jacket, watching the flow of bodies move past her. Uniforms everywhere. Crisp blues, digital camo, rank insignia glinting briefly when the sun broke through the cloud cover. Sailors walked with purpose, badges ready, shoulders squared. Some laughed. Some argued quietly. Some looked exhausted in a way only people trusted with too much responsibility ever did. She blended in by not blending in at all. Jeans, scuffed boots. No insignia. No rank on display. Just another woman who looked like she might be a contractor, a consultant, or someone's spouse killing time before a tour. The kind of person security had been trained to wave aside without a second thought. She'd chosen it that way. She shifted her weight slightly, feeling the ache in her knees protest the long hours of standing. The ache didn't bother her. Pain had become background noise years ago, something to acknowledge and then ignore. What she was watching mattered more. The checkpoint was efficient but tense. A young security guard manned the front, barely out of his 20s, jaw tight, eyes darting back and forth between IDs and faces. He'd likely been briefed that morning. Heightened readiness, unusual chatter, no details, just enough to keep him alert and on edge. Good, she thought. Nervous guards notice things. Or at least they're supposed to. When her turn came, she stepped forward calmly and reached into her jacket. Not for her ID, not yet, but out of habit, as if testing the rhythm of the moment. The guard didn't look up. "Civilians wait over there," he said, pointing sharply to the left with practiced impatience. She followed the direction of his finger. A small cluster of people stood behind a rope barrier, delivery drivers, maintenance staff, a woman clutching a clipboard and tapping her foot. All of them wore the faint, resigned expressions of people accustomed to being told where they belonged. She didn't move. Behind her, a sailor cleared his throat. Another checked his watch. The line slowed, irritation beginning to ripple outward. "Ma'am," the guard said again, this time louder, eyes finally lifting to her face. His gaze flicked over her quickly, hair pulled back, no makeup, face lined not with age but with experience. His expression hardened, the way people's did when they'd already decided who you were. "This line is for authorized military personnel only." She met his eyes. There was no challenge in her stare, no plea either, just calm, steady attention, the kind that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. "I am authorized," she said. Her voice wasn't raised, it wasn't sharp, it was simply certain. The guard scoffed softly. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this, you can't just—" "Sir," a petty officer behind her muttered, "we're gonna be late if—" The guard held up a hand, irritation flaring. Authority, even borrowed authority, was a fragile thing. "Ma'am, step aside." Still, she didn't move. For a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. The hum of engines faded. The wind off the water seemed to pause. She could feel eyes on her now, curious, annoyed, amused. She'd been in rooms like this before. Different base, different year, same assumptions. Back then she'd been younger, louder, she argued, proved, explained. It had taken time, too much time, to learn that the fastest way to command a room was not to demand respect but to let silence do the work. She let it work now. "Ma'am," the guard snapped, cheeks flushing, "you're holding up military operations." The phrase hung in the air, heavy with irony. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Holding up military operations. She thought of the nights she'd slept in her boots, the orders she'd signed that sent people into danger and brought some of them back in flag-draped boxes, the decades she'd spent being the first one in and the last one out. The meetings where men twice her volume spoke half her insight and still got credited for it. Holding up military operations. A flicker of something crossed her face, not anger, not pride, but something colder, something settled. Understood, she said. The guard relaxed slightly, mistaking her tone for surrender. Good, now please. She reached into her jacket pocket. Not quickly, not dramatically, just deliberately. The movement was subtle, but it triggered something primal. The guard stiffened. The petty officer behind her leaned back instinctively. A nearby lieutenant narrowed his eyes. She drew out a small, weathered ID card. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. She held it out between them, 2 fingers pinching the edge, waiting. The guard took it with a frown, already rehearsing the lecture he'd deliver when he proved her wrong. His eyes dropped to the card. Then stopped. His lips parted slightly. He blinked once. Then again. The color drained from his face, so fast it was almost alarming. Sir, he started, then froze, swallowed, and tried again. Ma'am, I. The lieutenant stepped closer. What's the holdup? The guard didn't answer. He just handed over the card, hands suddenly unsteady. The lieutenant glanced at it casually. Then his posture changed. It wasn't dramatic. It was instinctive. Years of training snapping into place before his mind could catch up. His shoulders straightened. His expression wiped clean of annoyance and replaced with something closer to shock. He looked at her, really looked. Rear Admiral, he said quietly, disbelief and awe tangled together. The word traveled. Like electricity. Conversations died mid-sentence. A pair of sailors stopped laughing. A commander at the edge of the pier turned, sensing the shift without knowing why. The lieutenant snapped a salute so sharp it echoed. Others followed, salutes rising in uneven succession as realization spread. Rank mattered here. History mattered. And 2 stars carried weight even when they weren't visible. She accepted the salutes with a brief nod, retrieving her ID. Thank you, she said evenly. The guard looked like he might faint. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't, you weren't. Wearing a uniform, she finished for him. He nodded miserably. She studied him for a beat, not unkindly, not forgivingly either, just honestly. Assumptions get people killed, she said. Learn from this one. Yes, ma'am, he breathed. She stepped past the checkpoint at last, boots crossing the threshold onto the restricted pier. The line behind her surged forward, but no one spoke. Eyes followed her as she walked away, calm as ever, hands back in her pockets as if nothing remarkable had just occurred. She'd taken no pleasure in it. Because she could feel it now. The subtle vibration underfoot, the faint, wrong rhythm in the air, the sense that something was out of place, not here at the checkpoint but farther down the pier. She lifted her gaze toward the gray silhouettes of the ships ahead. And that was when the first alarm began to sound. The sound of the alarm was sudden, shrill, and commanding, slicing through the salty air like a blade. Red lights began to flash along the pier, bouncing off the steel hulls of destroyers, tugboats, and docked patrol vessels. Sailors stopped mid-step, some freezing with a hand raised to block their eyes from the flashing strobes, others moving instinctively toward designated stations. Confusion erupted instantly, overlapping with the instinctive rhythm of years of military drill. The woman, Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe, did not move faster than necessary. She never did. Every step she took was deliberate, precise. Boots struck the wet concrete with purpose, sending small splashes into shallow puddles left from an early morning drizzle. She had no badge, no uniform, no ceremonial star glinting in the sun, but she carried more weight in a single hand than most could understand. That little ID card, pressed and creased from years of service, was a weapon in itself, proof of authority that could open doors, stop arguments, and save lives if used wisely. She walked past the stunned guard, who had barely recovered from the earlier shock. His hands still trembled, and he could only stare as she moved with the calm inevitability of someone who had spent decades being underestimated and had turned it into a strategy. Behind her, the line of onlookers murmured quietly, glances darting between the flashing lights, the sudden panic, and the woman who had been a civilian in appearance just moments ago. Monroe didn't speak. Words would only slow the chain reaction she was already anticipating. She was calculating, weighing the unfamiliar situation against every similar scenario she had encountered over 35 years of naval service. She recognized the symptoms: an alarm with no accompanying explanation, rushed messages over the radio, scattered eyes searching for authority. People were waiting for someone to act, and instinctively she became the focal point. A young lieutenant, barely 28, appeared beside her, snapping to attention. "Admiral," he stammered, voice wavering, we didn't know it was you. I mean, we thought." She didn't flinch. Thought what? The lieutenant swallowed, eyes flicking nervously to the red alarms flashing down the pier. "Ma'am, we thought someone unauthorized had triggered the emergency system." Her lips pressed together. Years ago she would have scolded him, made him sit for hours reviewing protocol. Now she simply nodded. "Good assumption," she said softly. "Until it is. Now tell me everything you know." He hesitated, overwhelmed by her calm presence and the weight of her rank. We received an unverified report of a breach at Dock 3. No visual confirmation yet. Security cameras, some of them went offline as soon as the alarm sounded. Others show strange activity. Could be intruders, ma'am, or malfunction. We don't know yet." Monroe's eyes narrowed. The word unknown always carried danger with it. No one could act on the unknown without a plan, and the first mistake most people made in such moments was panic. "Lock down the perimeter. Seal all entry points. No one comes or goes without my authorization," she ordered. Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried authority that made men and women twice her age take a step back, like gravity itself had shifted toward her. Sailors scrambled to comply, moving with precision that had been drilled into them since basic training. Monroe followed them to the operations deck of a nearby command center, the floor vibrating slightly with the rhythm of distant engines. Her boots echoed softly, every step measured. Behind her, the lieutenant whispered, "Admiral, I didn't realize the alarms would start this quickly. Usually it's a drill, but—" She cut him off with a single look. No words, eyes like steel, unyielding. There was no time for hesitation. Drills were for learning, real crises were for action, and right now this was no drill. Inside the operations center, screens flickered to life. A half-dozen officers stood clustered around consoles, some speaking over radios, others scribbling notes or typing rapidly. The atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension that pressed into your chest and made it hard to breathe. Monroe moved to the central console, her presence immediately organizing the chaos. "Give me a status update now," she commanded. A communications officer swallowed, glancing nervously at a flickering monitor. "Ma'am, we have a partial visual on the dock. Unknown vessel approaching. No identifying markings. No response to hails. Security teams are reporting movement on the pier, but we can't confirm who or how many." Monroe's jaw tightened. She had seen enough unknowns to know that half the time assumptions were deadly. "Show me the feeds," she ordered. Screens switched quickly, displaying grayscale images with poor lighting, yet enough to make out shapes moving unnaturally. "Zoom in," she said. The officers obeyed. Monroe studied the images carefully. Someone or something was moving with purpose. Fast, coordinated, deliberate. Not a drunk sailor, not a trespasser. This was professional, trained, dangerous. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crackle of sound from the radio. A voice, low, smooth, mocking, filled the room. "Admiral Monroe," the voice said, "I wondered if you would be here." The room froze. Every eye turned to the central console, but it wasn't a visual feed. They could only hear him. "Identify yourself," Monroe demanded, her tone even but sharp. Oh, I have, but I see you've mistaken appearances again. You don't recognize me yet. Monroe's eyes narrowed. This voice belonged to someone she knew, someone she had faced once before in waters that had left scars and memories she still carried. A strategist, a tactician, a man who thrived on underestimating people. He was dangerous, brilliant, and unpredictable. The lieutenant at her side whispered urgently, "Ma'am, he's taunting us. He knows we're vulnerable." She didn't reply. Monroe scanned the rest of the room, taking stock of personnel, equipment, protocols. Every moment counted. The man on the radio was testing them, probing for weakness. She had to act before he learned where their true vulnerabilities lay. "Activate countermeasures," she said quietly, though every word carried weight. "Get eyes on every access point. Deploy security teams to intercept but do not engage unless instructed. And keep communication secure. No one speaks unless authorized by me." Officers scrambled. Keyboards clattered. Phones rang off the hook. Sailors moved with fluid efficiency, instinctively following her lead, drawn to the calm certainty of her presence. Monroe felt a familiar thrill, the combination of chaos and control, danger and precision. This was the rhythm she had trained for. This was what she had been born to do. The man's voice crackled again. "I must admit, I did not expect to see you today. You always have a way of appearing where you're least expected." Monroe's lips pressed together. He was right. She had always been underestimated. Too quiet, too unassuming, too careful to be taken seriously until it was too late. That would not happen today. She turned to the lieutenant. "Patch the feed directly to me. I want every angle, every shadow, every movement." He nodded, rapidly adjusting controls. The screen switched again, sharper now, showing the dock from multiple angles. Monroe's eyes flicked from one feed to another. She noticed the subtle shifts, the way shadows moved, how a figure paused unnaturally, how a glint of metal caught the light. Her gut tightened. He was not just testing them. He had come prepared. And if he was already this close, they had minutes, maybe less, before things went wrong. Monroe's fingers hovered over the console, tracing the paths of movement on the screens. She had trained officers under fire. She had coordinated operations in foreign waters. She had survived ambushes where no one else thought to live. And yet, the thrill of anticipation never dulled. A young ensign approached, voice trembling. "Ma'am, what do we do next? The reports." Monroe looked at him. Her gaze was steady, unyielding, and filled with the kind of authority that made even the most nervous officer stop in their tracks. "We do what we always do," she said. "We take control, we act, and we make sure they know no one surprises the United States Navy." The alarm continued to wail outside. Red lights flashed violently against the ships. Radios crackled with static and fragmented communications. Sailors and officers moved like cogs in a machine finally aligned. Monroe drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle across her shoulders. Years of experience, decades of command, countless lives, everything rested on her next moves. And then she spoke, low, precise, and deadly calm. "Let's find out who's inside our pier, and let's make sure they regret it." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then the first visual confirmed their fears, a shadowy figure moving with uncanny precision, not one but multiple, and each step was deliberate, confident. The screen flickered. A flash of recognition passed through Monroe's mind, someone she knew, someone she had faced before. A chill ran down her spine, because she knew exactly what was coming next. And it wasn't going to wait for introductions. The first flash of movement on the screen sent a ripple through the operations room. Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe's eyes narrowed, sharp and unwavering, scanning the grainy grain of the monitors. The shadowy figures moved along the pier with preternatural coordination, slipping between crates and shipping containers, ducking beneath scaffolding, sliding along walls as if the docks themselves were conspiring to conceal them. Every sailor in the room felt the tension in the air spike, like electricity before a storm. "They're not just intruders," Monroe muttered almost to herself. "They're trained." A calm officer whispered nervously from the corner. "Ma'am, we've got uniforms or at least something resembling them, but they're not ours. No insignias, no IDs, just black and gray tactical gear. We've never seen this pattern." Monroe leaned forward, her gaze sharp, calculating. Her mind raced through possibilities: mercenaries, spies, rogue operators, someone testing the base's vulnerabilities. The last option seemed the most likely. Nothing about this felt random. This was a plan. She straightened, her presence instantly commanding the room. "All right," she said, her voice calm but steel-edged. "Teams Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie secure the east and west perimeters. No engagement until I authorize it. Eyes only. We do not underestimate them. We do not make assumptions. This is a high-risk situation. Do not improvise." "Yes, ma'am," the teams responded, scrambling to their stations. Keyboards clattered. Radios crackled. Boots clicked against the metal floor of the operations deck. Monroe moved toward the central console, her fingers tracing over the displays as she absorbed every piece of live intelligence available. Another alarm went off, shriller and more insistent this time. Red lights bathed the walls of the operations room in an urgent glow. A lieutenant grabbed the nearest headset, speaking rapidly into the mic. "Admiral, we've got visual contact with at least 6 unknown operatives near Dock 3. They're moving fast, very fast." Monroe didn't flinch. Her heart rate was steady, controlled. She had been in worse situations, in foreign waters, facing impossible odds, with lives literally in her hands. Yet this pier, this dock, this home turf of the Navy's Atlantic Fleet, was now the stage for a test of her command, one that began with her being mistaken for a civilian. She breathed in slowly, the salty air mixing with the faint tang of burning diesel from nearby ships. She thought of her first command decades ago when she had been the youngest officer on the USS Hawthorne. Back then, she had learned the hard way that hesitation cost lives. Panic was worse. Clarity, decisiveness, and the ability to read the unknown, that was survival. "Patch all camera feeds to me. I want thermal, infrared, and high-definition live from every angle. I don't care if it kills the system. If they're moving, I want to see it. All of it," she said. "Yes, ma'am," a tech officer replied, frantically typing commands and toggling switches. Screens shifted, lit up, revealing new angles of the dock. The shadowy figures were moving faster now, splitting up strategically, testing the boundaries of the perimeter. Monroe's eyes caught something, a subtle flash of movement near a cargo crane. One of the operatives paused, scanning, then disappeared behind a stack of shipping containers. She recognized the pattern instantly. This was a reconnaissance move. They were gathering intel, mapping their path, calculating angles for entry. A voice over the radio cracked, tense and hurried. "Ma'am, we're picking up multiple unauthorized transmissions. Could be comm jammers. Signals are erratic. It's like they know exactly where we are." Monroe's jaw tightened. "Then we need to be smarter than they are. Priority 1, contain, observe, and neutralize the threat before they breach critical infrastructure. Priority 2, identify them. Priority 3, we win." One of the younger officers, barely able to meet her gaze, asked, "Ma'am, what if they've already infiltrated the base?" Monroe didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than words could convey. All heads in the room turned to her. Every sailor, officer, and tech knew instinctively that the next words she spoke could mean life or death. She finally spoke, slow and deliberate. "Then we deal with it. That's what we do. If they're inside, we flush them out. But nobody dies because someone panicked or assumed we were unprepared. Understand?" A chorus of acknowledgments followed. "Yes, ma'am." Outside, the alarm siren continued its urgent wail. Monroe could see, even from the operations room, the figures moving along the pier, darting between cover, checking lines of sight, coordinating silently. They were ghosts with purpose. She had faced adversaries like this before, men who relied on misdirection and assumption, but never ones who had calculated that she herself would be unrecognized. That mistake, she thought, would cost them dearly. Then a crackle of radio chatter interrupted the room, louder and clearer than before. "Admiral Monroe," the voice said, calm, smooth, mocking. "You really are persistent. I almost admire you. But I wonder, do you always step into danger alone?" The officers froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. Monroe's pulse remained steady, but her mind leapt to a memory decades old. A man who had exploited hesitation, misjudged courage, and underestimated a young female officer years ago. A strategist, tactician, and predator who had made her first command the proving ground for her ruthlessness. Her lips pressed together. "Identify yourself," she said evenly. There was a pause, then laughter, low, deliberate, confident. "You don't remember me. I expected better." Monroe's eyes narrowed. The room went silent. Even the hum of computers seemed muted, as if the air itself waited. "I remember exactly who you are," she said, "and I also remember what happens to people who underestimate me." The radio went dead. Static hissed. The alarms continued. Outside, the shadows moved faster. Monroe could almost hear the rhythm of their steps, the subtle clicks of tactical gear against steel, the faint whisper of intent behind every motion. "Deploy the drones," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of decades in command. "Get aerial and thermal overviews. I want every angle. We need eyes everywhere." "Yes, ma'am," a junior officer replied, already working the controls. The first drone lifted, its rotors humming softly, and sent live footage to the main screens. The shadows on the pier moved with a precision that made even seasoned officers in the room pause. They were coordinated, adaptive, aware. This was not a random attack. It was a carefully orchestrated infiltration. Monroe studied the feed, analyzing patterns, anticipating moves. "They're probing," she said quietly, "testing us, looking for weakness. The first mistake they make will be the last one." A lieutenant interrupted, voice tense. "Ma'am, should we engage now? They're close to Dock 3. Some of our teams report movement inside the perimeter." Monroe shook her head. "Not yet. We observe. We calculate. We control the fight, not react to it. Every second we wait gives us advantage. Every rash move costs us lives." Her eyes flicked to a monitor showing the distant end of the dock. A figure paused, then crouched behind a metal container. Something about the posture, the tilt of the head, the way hands adjusted equipment, made her stomach tighten with recognition. She had seen that style before, that calm, calculated assessment of the battlefield. "Commander," she said quietly, "who's leading that group?" The commander hesitated. "We don't know, ma'am. Could be a rogue mercenary or a former operative. They're skilled." Monroe leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "No, I know him. And if it's who I think it is, he knows exactly who he's dealing with." A junior ensign shivered. "Ma'am, do we have a plan if they breach?" Monroe turned slowly, locking eyes with the officer. Her stare was enough to silence the room, a reminder of every drill, every life-and-death decision, every moment that had forged her into the leader she was today. "We don't wait to react," she said. "We decide, we act, and we win. Everyone else follows, everyone else survives. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. The room's tension shifted slightly. Fear remained, but it was now tempered by focus and clarity. Monroe's presence, her calm decisiveness, had transformed panic into controlled preparation. But she knew the real test hadn't started yet. The unknown figure or figures were moving closer. They had only one shot to get this right. One mistake would be catastrophic. A radio crackled again. This time the voice was not mocking. It was clinical, almost cold. "Admiral Monroe, you can't stop what's coming. I'm already inside." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Time seemed to slow. Every officer froze, every sailor's heartbeat loud in their ears. Monroe felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, but it was not panic, it was clarity. She had faced this before. She would face it again. She straightened, voice calm but lethal. Then let's find out exactly who's inside, and let's make sure they regret it. Outside, the red lights continued to flash. The shadows moved. The pier had become a chessboard, and Monroe, the unassuming woman once mistaken for a civilian, was about to make the first move. The words on the radio still echoed in Monroe's mind. "Admiral, he's already inside." The room went instantly silent. Every officer, sailor, and tech froze mid-action. The air felt thicker, heavier, charged with the tension of anticipation. The alarms continued to scream outside, their red light reflecting sharply off the steel hulls of nearby ships. Yet inside the operations center, the chaos had contracted to a single, focus point: Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe. She stood calm as ever, boots planted firmly on the cold metal floor, eyes scanning the dozens of monitors in front of her. Each screen flickered with grainy images of the pier, shipping containers, and darkened alleyways between buildings. The figures on the screens were still moving, sliding through the shadows like predators, but one thing was clear: Monroe could see the pattern. Someone inside was coordinating them. Someone she knew. Someone she had faced before. A young ensign, barely able to hold her headset steady, leaned close to Monroe. "Ma'am, we don't even know how he got past perimeter security. Our cameras show the docks clear 5 minutes ago, then suddenly—" Her voice trailed off, uncertainty palpable. Monroe's jaw tightened. "Assumption," she said softly. "The first mistake everyone makes is assuming what they can't see. Don't." A lieutenant stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. "Admiral, we need to act. Orders are coming from higher command. We could authorize lethal engagement." But his voice faltered. "We don't even know who's inside. Could be civilians, could be." "Could be," Monroe interrupted, calm, cutting, and absolute. "Or it could be exactly what it looks like. Either way, we control the fight, not the panic. We do not guess. We do not hesitate. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," the room echoed, voices taut with tension. Monroe turned back to the screens. She watched as one of the shadowy figures paused by a large crane, silhouetted against the dim gray morning. A second later, another figure emerged, moving like a ghost across the open pier, sliding behind stacked crates, their movements precise, deliberate. Monroe's mind catalogued every motion: the angle of the head, the spacing of the feet, the pause, the subtle adjustment of gear. This was someone trained. Not just trained, but meticulous, methodical, experienced. "Dangerous." A calm officer pointed at one of the screens. "Ma'am, thermal feed just picked up an unknown signature inside Dock 3. Matches human movement, multiple signatures, at least 4. They're coordinated, ma'am. We're not looking at a random intrusion." Monroe exhaled slowly, her mind moving through decades of command. She remembered ambushes she'd survived, assaults that had cost lives, strategies that had failed, but she also remembered the victories. She knew the rhythm of chaos, and she knew that the person inside wasn't just any intruder. He was clever enough to anticipate panic, to exploit hesitation. She recognized the pattern. She recognized the hand. The radio crackled again, the voice low, almost amused. "Admiral Monroe, always in the thick of things, aren't you? I wondered if you'd even show up today." Monroe's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not flinch. She did not answer immediately. She allowed the pause to stretch, forcing him to feel the silence. It was a weapon she had learned to wield long ago, silence that could make a confident man rethink his plan in the blink of an eye. "You know who I am," the voice continued. "I don't have to introduce myself." "Yes," she said finally, calm but commanding. "And you've underestimated me before. I hope you remember how that turned out." Static filled the line for a moment, then silence. The room exhaled collectively, but Monroe didn't. Her eyes remained fixed on the screens. She had no time for relief. The threat was inside, and he was moving fast. Teams Delta and Echo, she said, voice clipped and sharp, move into Dock 3. Contain all exits. Engage only if directly threatened. I want full visual coverage. No surprises, no missteps. Yes, ma'am, the teams responded, their movements sharp, rehearsed, professional. Monroe walked to the nearest console, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. She patched in every camera feed she could access, flicking rapidly between thermal imaging, infrared, and standard cameras. Every shadow was tracked, every movement analyzed, every subtle sound noted. She had learned over the years that when seconds mattered, hesitation was the enemy. The lieutenant beside her swallowed audibly. Ma'am, what if he set up traps, explosives? The teams are moving, but the pier's a maze, it's a nightmare in there. Monroe did not flinch, she didn't even look at him. Then we rely on what we control. Our eyes, our coordination, our training. We do not improvise, improvisation kills, precision saves. A young tech officer pointed at a screen. Ma'am, thermal picks up multiple signatures near the crane. Their weight, they're regrouping. Looks like they're converging. Could be an ambush. Monroe's jaw tightened. Then we prepare for it. No one moves alone. Everyone covers each other. Firewalls on comms, eyes everywhere. If he's here, he's playing a game. But it's our game now. The room was tense. Every person present fully aware that a single wrong move could cost lives. Monroe felt it too, the weight of responsibility pressing down, heavier than steel. She had been in situations like this before. She had led men and women through danger, through chaos, through crises that should have killed them. And yet, here she was again, facing the calm, deliberate hand of an enemy who knew her reputation. She glanced at the lieutenant again. Who is leading this intrusion? I need a name. I need history. I need to predict him before he predicts us. The lieutenant shook his head. Ma'am, unknown. Could be a rogue agent, could be. Then we treat him like he knows what he's doing, Monroe interrupted. And we assume he underestimates me, because he always does. Her words were quiet, but the effect was immediate. The junior officers straightened, eyes bright with focus. Sailors moved more decisively. Even the commander at the edge of the room leaned closer, recognizing the calm, deliberate authority that Monroe radiated. The screens flickered. A shadow emerged in the thermal feed, one figure, tall, confident, moving with precision. Monroe's pulse didn't quicken. It never did in moments like this. But her mind raced, calculating probabilities, predicting paths, anticipating decisions. She recognized the silhouette. Her lips pressed together. She knew him. Sir, she muttered under her breath, you really thought I wouldn't recognize you here. Then a sudden alert sounded. One of the security feeds picked up rapid movement at the far end of the pier. Monroe leaned forward, fingers hovering over the console. The screen showed someone placing equipment along the railing. Cables, sensors, something designed to block, disable, or worse. Her heart rate didn't spike, but the room's tension did. The lieutenant's hand hovered over the radio. Ma'am, should we? Monroe's eyes snapped to him. No, wait, observe, we control the fight, we do not react blindly. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, he said, voice tight with tension. The shadow on the screen paused, then moved deliberately toward Dock 3. Monroe recognized the movement, the same rhythm, the same strategic foresight she had faced years ago in foreign waters, in situations that had forced her to think faster than anyone around her. Her voice was quiet but deadly calm. Teams Delta and Echo advance, eyes sharp. Every entrance, every container, every shadow. If he's here, we will find him, and he will not leave. Outside, the alarm continued its shrill, relentless scream. Red lights flashed. The water lapped against the concrete pier. Every sailor felt the weight of the moment. The first direct confrontation with a known adversary within the base's perimeter. And Monroe, the woman once mistaken for a civilian, stood at the center of it all, calm, decisive, and ready. The first direct encounter was coming. And no one in that room had any idea just how close death had crept to them. The shadow on the monitor moved with unsettling precision, cutting through the dock like a phantom. Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe leaned closer, her eyes narrowing, every nerve alert, every instinct honed over decades telling her the same truth. This wasn't just a tactical breach, it was personal. She recognized the style immediately. The way he moved, the subtle pauses, the way he used the shadows for cover. It was the same methodical, calculated rhythm she had faced years ago, in waters far from home, where the stakes had been just as high, but the consequences less public. Her jaw tightened. "He's not random," she said, voice low but carrying authority. "This isn't a blind strike. He knows exactly where he is, and he knows exactly who he's dealing with." A lieutenant hesitated beside her. "Ma'am, you know him." Monroe didn't answer immediately. She let the pause stretch, forcing him to feel the weight of her experience. The young officers had learned quickly that hesitation was not weakness, it was control. And Monroe wielded control like a blade. "Yes," she said finally, calm but lethal, "and he should remember who I am." The room went silent. The monitors flickered, showing multiple points of movement. The intruder had split his team. One operative moved along the eastern edge of the dock, another ducked behind a shipping container near the crane, and the rest fanned out with coordinated precision, almost like they were rehearsed actors in a deadly play. Monroe traced the movement with her finger. She felt the old rush of adrenaline, the kind that came not from fear, but from clarity. Every decision she made in the next moments could mean life or death. "Teams Delta and Echo," she said, her voice sharp. "Advance. Maintain formation. Every entrance, every shadow, every container. Observe first, engage only if threatened. I want eyes everywhere, cameras, drones, everything. We're not reacting, we're controlling." "Yes, ma'am," the teams responded, snapping into action. Boots clanged against metal floors, radios crackled, and the low hum of drone rotors filled the room. Monroe's gaze remained fixed on the screens, watching, calculating. And then it happened. A flash of recognition, just a glimpse, but unmistakable. One of the intruders paused near the crane, crouched slightly, adjusting equipment. The tilt of the head, the confident yet careful positioning of the body, it was him. Her pulse didn't spike, but every muscle in her body tensed. She remembered the first time she had encountered this man, a strategist, a predator, someone who thrived on underestimating her. She had been younger then, less experienced, and he had almost won. That was the day she had learned that underestimation could be fatal. "Commander," she said quietly, her voice like ice, "I need to know everything you have on him. History, tactics, previous operations, weaknesses. Now." The commander shuffled through files rapidly, flicking open dossiers, scanning for any relevant intel. "Ma'am, this is someone who operates outside the law, outside conventional tactics. Skilled in infiltration, sabotage, and manipulation. He's unpredictable, but he has a signature style. Calm, calculated, anticipates hesitation. He underestimates those who appear passive, but he rarely underestimates someone with his history." Monroe nodded, lips pressed tight. "Then we don't give him hesitation. He doesn't control the narrative, we do." A calm officer pointed at the monitors. "Ma'am, thermal picks up movement near the eastern dock. 3 operatives regrouping. One of them, he's looking directly at cameras, seems to be aware we're watching." Monroe's eyes narrowed. He knew. He had already identified her observation points, already calculated their strategy. She had anticipated this. That was the pattern, the ghost from her past, always probing, always testing. But Monroe wasn't the same officer he had underestimated before. "Patch him through," she said quietly. "I want a voice contact now." A young officer froze. "Ma'am, are you sure that's risky? He could." "I'm sure," Monroe interrupted, calm but deadly. "I want him to know who he's facing. Confidence can be a weapon." The lieutenant hesitated but complied. The radio crackled to life, and the smooth, mocking voice filled the operations room once more. "Admiral Monroe," the voice purred, calm and taunting. "I wondered if you would actually respond." "I did," Monroe replied evenly. "Because unlike you, I don't assume I've already won before the fight begins." A subtle tension rippled through the room. Even the seasoned officers instinctively leaned in, listening, their nerves taut. The adversary spoke again, slow and deliberate. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But I've studied your tactics, Admiral. I know how you operate. I know your moves before you make them." Monroe didn't flinch. She let the pause stretch, the silence working like a weapon. Then she spoke, her tone calm, steady, and lethal in its control. "And I've studied yours. I remember exactly how you think, how you plan, and how you underestimate those you see as weak. You did it once. You won't do it again." Static hissed through the line, then laughter, low, deliberate, almost predatory. "Impressive. I expected more hesitation, but I see you haven't changed much. Same cold precision, same arrogance. You think that makes you untouchable." Her lips pressed together. Monroe's fingers hovered over the console, mapping movement on the monitors, coordinating her teams. "Confidence isn't arrogance, it's calculation, it's control. And I control this dock, every entrance, every shadow, every movement. You do not get the first strike here." He chuckled softly. "Bold words, I like that. I almost admire you, almost." Monroe's eyes sharpened. "Then you'll know this. Anyone who underestimates me pays for it, and I don't negotiate with shadows." Her words were precise. Every officer in the room understood. They were now operating with the clarity of a leader who had faced death, danger, and deception countless times. The intruder was skilled, yes, but Monroe was precise, disciplined, and decades ahead in experience. She leaned closer to the monitors, tracking the movement of the team near Dock 3. "I want real-time updates on every team. Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot. Observe, contain, and neutralize if necessary. But I make the decisions. No one else. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," the teams echoed, their voices taut with focus and determination. Monroe studied the screens, absorbing the thermal and infrared feeds. Every shadow, every subtle movement was analyzed, cataloged, and anticipated. She could see the approach patterns, the adjustments, the deliberate pauses. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. And she was learning it, reading it, countering it. Then one of the screens flashed, sudden, sharp. A single operative froze mid-step. A glint of metal caught the light. Monroe's pulse didn't quicken, but her mind snapped into clarity. That movement, the pause, the glint, signaled preparation for action, for attack. "Positions," she barked. "Delta and Echo full coverage, Foxtrot flank from the north. All units eyes sharp. Don't fire unless you have clear visual. I repeat, observe, control, neutralize only if threatened." The officers and sailors moved with precision, the kind born from drills, training, and years under Monroe's command. The intruders were professionals, but Monroe had something they couldn't anticipate: experience, foresight, and absolute command. The voice returned over the radio, mocking calm. "You really think you can stop this, Admiral? That I've miscalculated?" Monroe leaned back, eyes cold, unwavering. "I don't think, I know. And when this is over, you'll regret every assumption you made today." Outside, shadows moved faster. Thermal feeds showed converging patterns. The breach was imminent. Monroe's mind raced, calculating probabilities, predicting actions, preparing responses. Every second mattered. Every choice carried weight. And Monroe, once mistaken for a civilian, was now the fulcrum on which the fate of the dock balanced. The radio crackled one final time before cutting out. Silence fell, heavy and tense, broken only by the low hum of equipment and the distant alarms on the pier. Monroe didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the screens. Because she knew the next move would define everything. And the ghost from her past was about to make it. The operations room was a hive of controlled chaos. Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe stood at its center, a calm anchor in a storm of blinking monitors, flickering lights, and the relentless wail of alarms from the pier. Every officer and sailor waited for her command, their breaths held, hearts pounding, knowing that the next decisions could mean life or death. Outside, the shadows moved like predators. Thermal feeds flickered, showing figures advancing with practiced coordination along Dock 3. Every step, every pause, every flicker of motion was precise, as if choreographed. Monroe had anticipated this. She had tracked patterns, analyzed behavior, and read movements from decades of experience. But she knew one thing: even preparation had its limits. Her eyes flicked to the main console, where a live feed showed one intruder crouched by a railing, assembling what appeared to be a device: wires, sensors, a timer. Monroe's stomach tightened slightly, not with fear but with awareness. This was no ordinary infiltration. This was sabotage, carefully planned and executed. "Ma'am," a lieutenant said hesitantly, voice tight with tension, "we could authorize engagement. Let our teams neutralize them now. They're exposed if we strike." Monroe's eyes didn't leave the screen. "If we strike blindly," she said quietly, "we escalate. We could trigger what we can't control, and we might lose more than just the dock. That's why I am not authorizing engagement. Yet." Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it pressed on the room like steel. She had faced impossible decisions before, in foreign waters, in crises where hesitation meant disaster. But this was different. This was home turf, civilians nearby, critical infrastructure at risk, and a predator who knew exactly how she thought. The lieutenant swallowed. "Ma'am, if he completes whatever he's setting up." Monroe's eyes snapped to him. "Then we neutralize it on our terms, not his, understand? No assumptions, no panic, observation first, control first. Action only when necessary, that is command." "Yes, ma'am." She turned to the tech officer. "Patch in all remaining camera feeds. I want eyes on every point: North Dock, South Pier, the cranes, containers, every shadow. Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, maintain positions. Observe. Report. I will make the call when we move." "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied, fingers flying over the controls. Monroe exhaled slowly. Her mind ran through contingencies, every decision mapped like a chessboard. The intruder had anticipated hesitation. He had studied her before, relied on assumptions, relied on the idea that she could be underestimated. But he had forgotten one thing: she did not make assumptions. She controlled outcomes. A sudden alert flashed across the console. Delta Team reported a second intruder near the eastern perimeter. Thermal signature confirmed, moving deliberately, approaching the critical access point. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Foxtrot reposition to intercept," she ordered. "Maintain stealth, maintain distance. Observe without engaging unless necessary. Everyone else hold positions. Eyes sharp." "Yes, ma'am." Monroe moved to the central console, tracing the movements of the intruders. She recognized the patterns from her past confrontations: the subtle pauses before action, the way the leader scanned the area, the calculated spacing between team members. It was tactical genius and arrogance. She had seen it before, and she knew it could be exploited. The radio crackled, the smooth, mocking voice filling the operations room again. "Admiral Monroe," he said, calm, measured, teasing, "I see you've arrived. How predictable." Monroe's lips pressed into a thin line. "Predictable doesn't mean weak. You should know that by now." There was a pause, then a laugh. "Ah, you always do know. But this time things are different. We have momentum. You are not in charge here anymore, you're reacting." She didn't flinch. Her mind raced. Momentum could be countered. Predictability could be leveraged. The room, the teams, the technology, they were all tools, and she was the master of the tools. "Command teams," she said quietly but decisively. "Prepare to implement Plan Gray." A murmur ran through the room. The officers froze. "Ma'am, Plan Gray is..." Yes, Monroe interrupted, voice steel-edged, classified, I'm aware. And we don't have the luxury of protocol today. If we hesitate, we lose. Execute on my mark. Her eyes flicked to the main monitor. The shadowed figure by the railing was now moving with speed, carrying what appeared to be a device. Thermal feeds confirmed other intruders fanning out. Monroe's pulse remained steady. Her mind, however, calculated every variable: distance, timing, lines of sight, reaction time. She pressed a finger to the console, bringing up drone feeds. Drones hovered silently above the pier, providing a live bird's-eye view of the dock, the intruders, and the perimeter. Their rotors whined softly, a quiet contrast to the screaming alarms below. Monroe leaned in, speaking slowly, deliberately, her voice carrying authority that made even the most seasoned officers tense with anticipation. Delta Echo, Foxtrot, monitor your sectors. Thermal, visual, drone coverage. Confirm every movement. Do not fire until I give the order. We control the fight, we do not react to it. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, the teams responded, their voices taut with focus. Monroe's mind raced. Every possible scenario, every contingency, every move and countermove ran through her like a high-speed simulation. The intruder had momentum, but she had experience, discipline, and the calm control that came from decades of facing impossible odds. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, closer, more insistent. Admiral Monroe, I'm inside. You can't stop me now. The room went silent. Even the hum of equipment seemed to pause. Monroe's eyes narrowed. He was inside, yes, but he was playing by predictable rules. He assumed she was reacting. He assumed he had initiative, and that was his mistake. Monroe took a slow breath. Commander, she said quietly, update me on every team. Thermal, drone, foot patrol. I want complete coverage. I will make the decision in 3, 2, 1. She raised her hand. Execute Plan Gray. The officers froze for a heartbeat, then moved as one, following her precise orders. Monitors flickered, thermal overlays shifted, drone feeds repositioned, and teams advanced with calculated precision. Suddenly, the intruders' rhythm changed. They had anticipated the static defenses, but not the dynamic counterstrike. Monroe's teams moved strategically, containing exits, cutting off escape routes, and watching every shadow. The intruders faltered, their momentum disrupted. The intruder's voice came through the radio, calm but strained. You adapted. I did not expect this. Monroe's eyes remained locked on the monitors. You always underestimate me, she said softly. That's your mistake, every time. On the dock, thermal signatures showed movement slowing. One figure paused near the device he had been assembling, scanning, calculating. Another fanned out, trying to regain initiative, but Monroe's teams anticipated every adjustment. The lieutenant beside her whispered, Ma'am, he's hesitating. You're controlling the fight. Monroe nodded once. Good, now keep it that way, eyes everywhere, observation first, control first, action only if necessary. The intruder moved again, faster this time, attempting to regain momentum. Monroe's pulse remained steady, mind running simulations at lightning speed. Drone feeds captured every step. Thermal overlays revealed weaknesses in the intruder's positioning. Monroe's fingers danced over the console, redirecting teams, adjusting coverage, sealing exits. Time seemed to stretch. The room was tense. Officers held their breaths. Outside, the pier was a chessboard and every piece was moving, but Monroe had more pieces in play than the intruders could anticipate. And then, the shadowed figure by the railing froze, realizing the trap, realizing the perimeter had been redefined, realizing Monroe's control was absolute. The room held its breath. Monroe didn't move. She let them feel the weight of their mistakes. Because she didn't just command operations. She commanded perception, strategy, and consequence. And the intruder who had once underestimated her was about to pay for it. The dock was a maze of shadows, steel and concrete, illuminated only by the harsh red glow of warning lights and the faint gleam of dawn struggling through gray clouds. Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe's teams had repositioned according to Plan Gray, cutting off exits and monitoring every container, crane, and shadow. But the intruders were still inside. And now, Monroe was about to confront the one she recognized immediately, the ghost from her past. She had tracked him through decades of operations, the calculated pauses before action, the almost imperceptible hand signals, the way he studied opponents before making a move. He was dangerous, brilliant, and relentless. And Monroe, though decades older and commanding far more resources than he had anticipated, knew him well. She had faced him before, in waters where failure could not be tolerated, and she had survived because of discipline, foresight, and sheer force of will. The operations room was tense, every officer frozen in anticipation as she monitored thermal feeds and drone overlays. She didn't speak immediately. She studied the shadows on the screen, every move precise, every step predictable if you knew the rhythm of a man obsessed with control. "He's inside Dock 3, the lieutenant whispered. "We can see him on thermal. He's preparing something." Monroe's jaw tightened. "Good. That's exactly where I want him. Let him believe he has initiative. Let him think he's controlling the flow. But every step he takes is a step into my strategy." A young officer asked hesitantly, "Ma'am, do we engage now?" Monroe's eyes flicked to the monitor, scanning the shadowed figure. Her pulse was steady. "No, not yet. Observation first. Control first. Action only when absolutely necessary. Wait for the moment that gives us advantage." The intruder paused, crouched near the equipment he had been assembling. He adjusted his stance, checking the lines of sight, scanning the perimeter. Monroe recognized the signature immediately. The same pause, the same calculated self-confidence she had seen years ago during a foreign deployment when he had tried to manipulate her into overextension. The radio crackled. "Admiral Monroe," the voice purred, calm, smooth, and taunting. "You've moved your pieces well, but tell me, how long can you maintain control?" Monroe did not answer immediately. She let the pause stretch, letting the silence press against him. Then she spoke, voice low, precise, and lethal. "Long enough to end this on my terms." He chuckled softly. "Always confident, always precise. But tell me, Admiral, do you enjoy the dance, the tension, the moment when everyone waits for your move?" Her eyes narrowed. "I enjoy one thing, survival for everyone under my command. That's what matters. The rest is irrelevant." The shadowed figure moved suddenly, adjusting the device, wires glinting faintly under the red lights. Monroe's fingers hovered over the console. She tracked him as he shifted positions, preparing to deploy whatever he had brought inside. "Delta and Echo," she commanded, voice sharp, cutting through the tension. "Maintain positions. Contain him. Monitor thermal and drone feeds. Foxtrot, flank from the north. Observe. Do not engage unless you confirm a threat. I repeat, observe first, act second. Everyone understands?" "Yes, ma'am," the teams responded, boots clanging against the floor as they repositioned. Monroe traced the intruder's movements on the screens. He was skilled, precise, methodical, but she had anticipated the rhythm of his actions. Her mind calculated angles, timing, escape routes, and potential countermeasures. Every move he made was a piece in a puzzle she had already solved in her mind. And yet he was still dangerous. The radio crackled again. "Do you remember me, Admiral?" the voice asked, teasing, almost intimate. "I've waited a long time for this moment." Monroe's jaw tightened. "I remember everything, every move, every mistake, and I know exactly what you will try next." There was a pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, a sound came through the comms, a soft click, a shift of metal. The intruder was adjusting, testing, preparing. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Commander," she said quietly, "he's at the crane, preparing to move the device. Thermal confirms 1 minute before deployment if uninterrupted." The lieutenant's voice was tight. "Ma'am, he's fast, and he knows our coverage, any mistake." "No mistakes," Monroe said flatly. "We control the fight, remember that." She turned to the tech officer. "Patch the drone feeds directly to me. I want every angle, infrared, thermal, and visual, now." "Yes, ma'am." Fingers danced over controls, screens flickered, and the room became a nerve center of calculated focus. Monroe analyzed every step, anticipating the intruder's rhythm. Then he moved again. Swift, silent, precise. He adjusted his position, checking lines of sight, preparing to escape or to deploy the device. Monroe's pulse remained steady. Foxtrot intercept north, Delta flank east, Echo maintain coverage, contain, do not engage, observe. "Yes, ma'am." The intruder paused near a shipping container, peering around cautiously. Then he froze. Thermal cameras captured the moment, because he realized something he had not anticipated: the dynamic repositioning of Monroe's teams. He had assumed momentum, assumed initiative, assumed she would react, but she had predicted his calculations. A flash of understanding crossed his face, slight, almost imperceptible, and Monroe saw it on the monitor. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Commander," she said quietly, "he's realized the trap. Now we wait. Timing is everything." The shadow moved again, slower this time, carefully, as if testing each step. Monroe's mind calculated. One misstep, one exposure, one hesitation, and he would be contained. But she knew him well enough to anticipate he would not make it easy. The radio crackled again. "Impressive," the voice said, strained, almost begrudgingly. "You always find a way to anticipate, but this is only the beginning." Monroe leaned in, voice calm and lethal. "It's the end of your beginning, and I decide when it ends." The drone feeds highlighted his team, showing positions, weaknesses, and potential paths. Monroe's fingers hovered over the console, guiding her units with precision. Every angle covered, every line of sight monitored, every escape route blocked. Outside, the shadows shifted, the red warning lights reflecting off metal and water, creating illusions of movement. The intruder made one final attempt to regain momentum, stepping toward the device. Monroe's pulse remained steady. She had anticipated this. Her finger pressed a button. A soft click, and a mechanical drone deployed a small, controlled distraction, a smoke canister releasing dense, white vapor to obscure the intruder's vision, forcing him to pause. "Now," she said, "Delta and Echo converge. Foxtrot cover north, contain him, engage if threatened." Thermal feeds showed chaos in their ranks. The intruder's team faltered, disrupted by the smoke, while Monroe's units moved seamlessly, closing in from multiple angles. Monroe's eyes were fixed on the main figure. She knew him. She had tracked him for decades, anticipated him through strategy and instinct, and now he was finally within her grasp. The radio crackled one last time before cutting out. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the hum of equipment and the distant alarms on the pier. Monroe didn't move. She let them feel the weight of her presence. She let the intruder understand the price of underestimating her. Because she didn't just command operations, she commanded consequence. And the first direct confrontation was about to happen. The air on Dock 3 was thick with smoke, tension, and the metallic scent of adrenaline. Rear Admiral Catherine Monroe stood at the edge of the pier, her boots planted firmly on steel grating, eyes scanning the shifting shadows. The alarms blared, sirens cutting through the morning fog, but Monroe's mind was calm, focused. Every step, every breath, every decision was measured. The intruder, the one she had tracked for decades, the predator who had underestimated her once before, was trapped. Plan Grey had worked perfectly. His team disrupted, his escape routes cut off, and the dock under complete surveillance. Thermal feeds confirmed his position near the crane, crouched low, wires and devices at his side, the faint glint of metal catching the intermittent light. Monroe knew that one false move could trigger catastrophe. The device he carried could be lethal, but she also knew she had him exactly where she wanted. She crouched slightly, moving silently, her body a shadow within the fog. Her team remained in position, observing, ready to act, but Monroe would take the first step. This was her command. This was her fight. The radio crackled. "Admiral Monroe, clever, very clever, but this isn't over. You can't possibly anticipate everything." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched him, calculated his stance, noted the subtle tension in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his hands. The smoke had disoriented him, forced him to pause, and now he was unsure. Monroe could see it in the thermal feed, in the rhythm of his breath. He was human. "Admiral," the lieutenant whispered, voice tight, "what's your move?" Monroe's lips pressed together. "The move," she said quietly, "is the one he won't anticipate. Precision first, control always, timing perfect." She rose slightly, stepping toward him, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced death and walked through it. Every step she took was deliberate, measured. The intruder's head shifted, scanning the dock, realizing too late that he was the one being observed. "Stop right there," Monroe called, her voice cutting through the fog, clear, commanding, absolute. The intruder froze, eyes narrowing, calculating. "You," he muttered, disbelief creeping into his tone. "I didn't think." "You assumed," Monroe said, voice calm but lethal, "that I would be reactive, that I would hesitate, that I would be underestimated." He crouched lower, wires in hand, trying to stabilize the device, trying to regain momentum. But Monroe had anticipated every action. She knew exactly what he was thinking. Every tactical decision he had made over the past hour was now a disadvantage. "Teams," she commanded quietly but sharply, "cover him. Contain every angle, no mistakes. Observation first. Engage if threatened." "Yes, ma'am," came the coordinated response over radios. Monroe advanced closer, her eyes locked on him. He shifted, sensing the trap, his team scattered, the device partially completed. He had expected chaos, fear, but Monroe's presence was not fear, it was certainty. "You underestimated me once," she said quietly, almost a whisper, "and you paid for it. Today it ends." He laughed, sharp and tense. "I've anticipated you every step. You think you've won." Monroe raised her hand. "I don't think I know." And then it happened, the moment she had anticipated. One step too far. One slight miscalculation. A glint of metal caught the faint morning light, revealing the critical weakness in his position. Monroe didn't hesitate. She drew her service pistol with absolute precision, the barrel steady, the sight aligned. "Admiral, wait," the lieutenant shouted over comms, but Monroe didn't need confirmation. The trajectory, the timing, the split-second angle, it was perfect. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp, precise, echoing off steel and water. The bullet struck with flawless accuracy, hitting the device and causing a controlled detonation. Not enough to destroy the dock, not enough to harm anyone else, but enough to neutralize the threat and force the intruder to surrender. The intruder fell to the ground, stunned, his team disoriented. Monroe stepped forward, eyes cold, unwavering. "It's over," she said, her voice carrying across the fog. He looked up at her, disbelief and grudging respect in his eyes. You're relentless," he muttered, breathing heavily. "I am command," Monroe said. "I am control. I am the consequence of underestimation, and today your mistake cost you everything." Her teams moved in swiftly, securing the area, restraining the remaining intruders and disarming the device completely. The dock, once a battlefield of shadows and tension, was now under full control. Thermal feeds confirmed all threats neutralized. Monroe stood at the edge, the smoke curling around her boots, her eyes scanning the dock one last time. The intruder, restrained and subdued, lay on the ground, defeated not by chaos, not by panic, but by strategy, foresight, and command. The lieutenant approached, awe and relief evident in his eyes. "Ma'am, you did it, all of it. No casualties, no chaos, just control. Monroe's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not relax. Not yet. Not until every corner, every shadow, every threat was fully neutralized. "This is what command looks like," she said quietly. "Not fear, not reaction, control, observation, decisiveness." Her eyes flicked to the intruder one last time. "And never forget," she said, voice low and cold, "that underestimating someone once is dangerous. Underestimating them twice is fatal." The fog lifted slightly as dawn broke fully over the dock. Red lights still flashed, alarms still blared, but Monroe's teams were calm, composed, and disciplined. Lives had been protected, the device neutralized, and the intruder finally subdued. Monroe exhaled slowly, the tension of the past hours slowly easing. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the water, the ships, the steel of the dock, and for the first time that morning she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had been mistaken for a civilian, underestimated by every shadow that crossed the pier, challenged by a man who thrived on chaos. But she had proven once again that discipline, foresight, and unwavering command could turn the tide of any threat. The lieutenant approached again. "Ma'am, the media, the command, they're going to want a statement. Everyone saw the footage, they'll call it heroic, extraordinary, but we know the truth." Monroe nodded. "The truth is control, observation, decisiveness. That's all anyone needs to know, everything else is noise." She turned, walking steadily toward her team, her silhouette sharp against the rising sun. The dock was silent now, controlled and safe. The threat had ended, not with chaos, not with luck, but with precision. And somewhere in the distance, restrained and defeated, the intruder finally understood what he had underestimated for the last time. Catherine Monroe had arrived. She had seen the threat, anticipated every move, and ended the siege with one decisive shot. The dock, once a battlefield, now stood as a testament, not just to strategy, not just to bravery, but to the fact that underestimation of a true leader came at a cost no one could survive.